So yeah, we're going to have a look. We've got Super Nintendo and Super Famicom. I've just recently retrobrighted the top half of the Super Famicom. There it is, that's my Super Nintendo. So this is my 20-year-old Super Nintendo from a long time ago. We just bought this Super Famicom, so we're going to open them up. We need a special screwdriver to do so. We're going to have a look inside. So yeah, this was a £5 special Nintendo only proprietary screws. If you watch our progress video, you can see a bit of me doing the retrobright thing. All you do is you take it apart. Make sure you've only got a piece of plastic to get everything out of it. Don't leave anything electronic in there. But basically, you coat it in peroxide, just a cheap bottle of peroxide stuff. Wrap it in cling film, stick it in the sun. I mean, people do take it very seriously. They mix that with Windoline, and they make their own little retrobrighting box out of like turkey cooking great big foil dishes, and they put two of them together with an ultraviolet light stuck inside and things like that. So yeah, this SNES has never been opened, I think, as far as I know. HAL Super Nintendo. Well, everybody knows, but this is obviously the Super Famicom is the original Super Nintendo in Japan. The US version looks completely different, but is the same inside. There's different stories about why that is. There was a suggestion Americans have Coca-Cola, obviously, and so they put their cans of Coca-Cola on the NES and spilt it into the machine, and so they built a machine that was all with square bits, so you can't balance it anywhere. I don't think that's true. I think they just decided because the Famicom and the NES look completely different, the new one should look different for Americans. They like big box things. But in the UK, strangely, we got the NES, like the Americans, the big box thing, but we got the Super Famicom that says Super Nintendo on it in Europe, interestingly. We also got a dodgy downscaled 50 hertz. The Super Famicom is built for 60 hertz NTSC. Never twice the same colour. And consequently, Nintendo have never cared about Europe, and it was just a very lazy downgrade. So because PAL is high resolution, we get this horrible squished image with borders, and I think supposedly the games actually run slower, as in the 60 hertz switches to 50 hertz, and it just everything goes slower. So, and obviously on the NES, it didn't really matter on the NES, did it? Well, the screws are certainly in better condition than that Super Famicom, but I think
I can't get one of them out.
I think the secret is with this Super Nintendo is that it's not been used for 20 years. I mean, I bought it quite late. Probably 1995, I reckon, or maybe even 96. I bought it for £10 from CEX.
That's not coming out.
And then went out and bought all the games. And the games were like £20 at that point, so that was good.
Got it.
There we go. But really, I mean, I probably played with it for a year. Went to university for a year, then took it to university and played with it for a couple of months at university, and it went in a box. And that was it. So, I get the impression the Super Famicom's had a lot of use by comparison. So, we've taken the screws off.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
It's actually very tiny inside.
Yeah, so that's the Super Nintendo. It's exactly the same as the Super Famicom. There's all these plastic bits and things. It's best to take all this apart if you're going to retrobright it. But if you're just looking inside, obviously you can just put that to one side. So the Super Famicom, don't worry about the front thingy, it's not attached properly. And you can see that is identical.
Right.
And there we go.
Oh,
so
look.
let's take off some of these shields. Slightly different shielding. What I will say about that shielding is that's actually covering chips which probably have Sony written on them. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's quite entertaining.
I mean, it's quite simple, this inside here. So normally you take a picture before you do it, so you know how things go back together.
Yeah. I found it's quite intuitive. I've only done the top bit, but it does seem quite intuitive. Now, I've actually already opened this once.
There we go.
There we go. And it was actually quite disgusting. So it's still a bit fluffy. There's a little bit of dust in mine as well, but I tell you, there was a ball of fluff sort of just sitting by the vent. I mean, a ball. A massive thing. Of course, I did it in the garden. And here we go. There it is, the Super Nintendo. A very clever piece of design. There was something that put me off back in the day. The reason why I was a bit delayed in buying one, really. I mean, well, first of all, let's talk about the sound. The sound for its time is actually pretty amazing. What you can't see there's actually some Sony chips. and obviously Nintendo worked with Sony quite a bit. It sounds like to me a Sound Blaster from the same time. So a Sound Blaster 16, that kind of thing. It sounds much the same as that to me, and that's what matters. What does it really sound like? It's certainly better than the Mega Drive, which although technically the Mega Drive sounds very good. I've never liked the sound of the Mega Drive, and I know about the stereo coming out the headphones to make it sounds a bit better. But you have to remember this was in Japan. This was built to beat the PC Engine, not the Genesis, not the Mega Drive, because the Mega Drive wasn't that successful in Japan. But I'll tell you what, North America were glad of it because the Genesis was massive in North America, and Sega were beating them at that point. Remember, it was the NES versus the Genesis at one point. And Sega did some really aggressive marketing, which apparently the Japanese Sega didn't like very much. But yeah, I mean the real important bit are these 4 chips here. That one there, that's the CPU. That's the controversial bit. Okay, it's not a 68,000. It's a 6C81, whatever it is. It's actually some sort of 6502 derivative. I always thought it was a 68,000 derivative, like a slow 68,000. It's not. It's actually a 6502. 3.58 megahertz. That's the same speed as the Spectrum. That really put me off back in the day. I was so excited about the Super Nintendo, and I'd read about the number of colours and etc. And that put me off. And I actually bought a Mega Drive at one point because that's 8 megahertz, not a 7 point whatever it is. But of course, it's really clever. The way these consoles work is they make the console as cheap as possible, and they make the money back on the games. And because it's a cartridge, they can put chips in the cartridge. So a chip that needed a faster processor, they put the processor in the cartridge. It's not just the Super FX chip. Pilot Wings has got an SA1, 10 megahertz version of that. So when you need it, they added it. So it works perfectly. And that's the RAM, 128k RAM. That's a fair amount for a console. Yeah, the software RAM. We've also got over here though video RAM. I think might be 64k video RAM, and that's actually static RAM, so it's very fast because that talks to these 2 things here, the PPU1 and the PPU2. Picture processing unit. Obviously we call it a GPU now, and that's where the magic happens. That's all the mode 7 and all that stuff, and all that fantastic sprite handling hardware and all that, and that's the secret. But really, it's the expandability. It's much more expandable than the Mega Drive. That was the idea. That it's almost like Nintendo didn't want to ever make new consoles. They didn't really want to make this one. They were sort of forced to. So they tried to make it expandable, and that's really the secret. If you think, you had Doom on the SNES. The secret was they put a processor in the cartridge, didn't they? So it's very clever design.
Yeah.
Very clever. Right, shall we open up the Super Nintendo and see if there's a difference? There are differences I know of, because there are different versions. There's a 1-chip version, I think, which combines the PPU1 and PPU2, probably the CPU and the RAM as well. I think later on, which was cheaper, but I think there was a bit of a downgrade in picture quality. I think, but which people only found out about when they used the composite. So these must be both 2-chip versions. Okay, and that's the Super Famicom. This shield's a little bit bigger, and we can't, and without disconnecting the front thing, we can't actually get inside. So let's compare the 2. So here they are side by side. I mean, there is a slight difference in positioning of the chips actually.
Yeah.
And there's this. That's some sort of bus. DMA maybe, or something like that. I don't think that's that significant. But the static RAM is in a different place. So that's the Super Nintendo. That's a Super Famicom. But they're clearly the same chips. That's the thing. And the shield on the back is different.
I mean, it could just be sort of like a different production run or something. They've got probably a different revision.
Yeah.
Because it's all the same. Because like you've got this chip looks like it's this one.
Yeah.
This one looks like it's this one. This one looks like it's this one.
Yeah. So
it's just a rearrangement.
Yeah. This actually says that the SNSP CPU number 2. That's an SNS CPU GPM number 1.
Interesting.
That's revision 1. So it's probably quite an early Super Famicom.
Yeah.
But I assume this must be a fairly early Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Obviously, like I said, like some versions, the whole sound module is in a socket in a little shielded box, and you can take it out. I don't know if that's when they fell out with Sony, and Sony were like, so yeah, and from there you can do 512 by 384 resolution. You can do, it's 32,768 colours, 15-bit colour, 128 on screen. I've seen reports of 256 on screen. I think it's 128, and 128 per sprite as well. So maybe they've added those two together. Some fantastic sprite handling hardware. There is an argument that maybe the actual sprite handling hardware is faster and better on the Mega Drive. The Mega Drive sprite handling hardware is fantastic, actually. But we know, overall, the SNES does seem to outperform the PC Engine and the Mega Drive. And of course, because you're running on cartridges, although it could do 512 by 384 resolution, none of the games used it. It's all 256 by 256, and you can tell it's not that high resolution, is it? And that was the idea of getting a CD drive. Obviously, the CD drive, you've got so much more memory. We could have had high resolution games, sadly. But we've got the PlayStation instead. Yeah, and the two PPUs, I assume the PPU 2, because it's in the middle, more in the middle, I assume that's what we'd call a graphics processor, the normal thing that draws stuff on the screen, handles the actual refresh of the screen and all that stuff. Maybe PPU 1 has got the clever graphics stuff in there, the hardware shearing effects and all that stuff, and obviously the sprites that does the magic. It doesn't matter that it's 3.5 megahertz, Very clever.
Well, 3.5 megas is just to get it up and running, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, you can put whatever you want in the cartridges.
Actually, the Japanese one seems a bit easier to take apart to me.
I wonder if it's been done before.
Well, no, I'm just thinking the layout, the shield sort of thing. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
You haven't got the ribbon in the way.
And it's probably earlier than this one. It's interesting. There were different laws about shielding, which often didn't make sense.
I'll tell you what's strange. I don't remember around this time whether there was any real modding going on of these things.
Not at the time. Not really. It is surprising there isn't more of that because of the way it's designed. It's so cleverly designed in expandability. It can have a whole CPU that just ignores the other one. See, Mega Drive can't do that. That was the problem with 32X even, which had to be a whole computer separately. That's why it's expensive. And and essentially the Doom cartridge, and that's basically what it was. It was like a 32X. And the Mega CD as well had the same problem. It had to wait till the 68,000 basically, and that was a problem. So yeah, I was annoyed about that 3.5 megahertz at the time. I remember seeing in the shops, you'd see Super Mario World and you'd see Sonic. That's why the Mega Drive did really well. You look at those two, and we all know what's the better game, don't we? It wasn't just a case of the gameplay is better. In Japan, Nintendo's response to the Genesis was to release Super Mario 3 on the same day. And it worked. The Genesis was third place in Japan, believe it or not. But that didn't work in North America, where it's they want to be much more down with the kids. And I think particularly here, I'm pretty sure the Mega Drive sold more here. I know in the end, the SNES outsold the Mega Drive in the end, globally. But I think here the Mega Drive outsold it, I reckon. Because I remember seeing it also in the shop. It was Super R-Type and Thunder Force 4 on the Mega Drive. There's no competition, And now I know it must have been it was a Mega Drive fanboy, wasn't it, putting on the better game for the Mega Drive. but there's plenty of fast shoot 'em ups on the SNES. You can just stick another chip in there. But apparently, I did read in the specs of the 68C16 thing. It's actually the chip that was in the 16-bit Apple II, the GS. And that's only 2 megahertz or something as well. But supposedly you get 1.5 MIPS. And an 8 megahertz 68,000 is going to get much the same. So a 10 megahertz one of these obviously is going to get a bit more than that. Of course, the ARM around the same time was getting 4.5. What was that Mega Drive advert called? In America, the adverts were ridiculous. There was Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Was the advert. They were directly, and they actually had footage of Nintendo games saying, "Look how rubbish this is. Look how good our games are." They were really direct about it. I remember when the SNES first came out, there was 4 games available with 4 reasons to buy something super, and over 100 reasons to buy something mega. The choice is yours. It's very un-Japanese to do that. Apparently, the Japanese lot weren't very happy about that. But I think Nintendo are much more top-down, so that Nintendo wouldn't let Nintendo of America to do anything like that. It's disrespectful. I mean, there's an argument. Nintendo were just happy just to carry on selling the Famicom because it was still going. It was still huge. But it was because the PC Engine outsold the Famicom in like '88. I think it was like, what? Someone's outselling Nintendo.
That's Super Bomberman.
It's a very typical thing. And the NES was even more ridiculous. The NES was even more ridiculous than you had those great big cartridges, and it was only that much. Even the Famicom's little cartridges, only half of it was taken up. And the later, I assume only the later ones, but the later 2600 cartridges, it was just one chip. And it went in that much of the great big cartridge like that. It's all about size, isn't it, in the 80s?
So basically, we've got a couple of chips through-hole soldered.
Yeah.
3-hole. I suppose it doesn't really matter in a...
So should we see what those? So I assume that big one must be the memory.
This
just
one.
the game. What it's saying on it, I can't quite see.
SPAL H6-0 6P3AK.
Oh, SPA1. Right, that's a special chip. That's I think that's the 10 megahertz. Got processor in it. It does a few other things as well.
I wonder if this is a game because it's actually copyrighted in Nintendo.
Oh, so that's the game, yeah.
D413A. Really simple, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. Castlevania 4 should be normal. Pilot Wings, I think, was the first one with something special in it.
Shall I put this back together?
Because everyone thinks of Pilot Wings as, oh, you see the power of the SNES. It can do all these effects. Of course, it had a chip in the cartridge doing it. So, yeah, it's very clever.
I hope we're going to see that then.
Yeah. So maybe Castlevania 4 will just be one chip. So that was Super Bomberman. This one is Pilot Wings. So this is very early. And it's got a whole load of things on it. So yeah, you can see SPA1. So that's probably the same one as in Bomberman. But it's got some other stuff on there as well.
So
maybe that's the game. Oh, that's DSP1. It's got a DSP chip in there as well. And over here, maybe all those are the games. There's something done in Malaysia. That's all that is. I bet that's the game there. That one.
This one.
Copyright 1992 Nintendo. It's interesting. Copyright 1992. I thought Pilot Wings was a release. I'm sure in 1990 the release titles were Mario World and Pilot Wings, and that was it. And in the US, they got Mario World bundled, and they got Pilot Wings, and they got SimCity, and something else. A couple of good games. We got Super R-Type, Pilot Wings, and bloody Super Tennis and Super Soccer. Bugger. So let's have a look in Castlevania 4 and see if it's any more basic. And I don't think Castlevania 4 has much. It might have a DSP, but I don't think anything else.
Well, it's the same as Super Bomberman.
Oh, it is, isn't it? Yeah. So that's Super Castlevania 4. That's got the SA1 in it as well. SPAL. Yeah, it's the same one, isn't it? And there's the game in that chip there. Copyright Nintendo. They're all copyright 1992, which is interesting.
Maybe they were... Are they programmable ROMs?
Absolutely.
So they just bought a massive batch of ROM chips.
Yeah. But it certainly looks like you can see Pilot Wings has got a lot more going on, which is supposed to be all the tricks that the SNES does anyway. Interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's so different, honestly. When you see on the video how yellow that was much more yellow than the rest of it.
I'm quite pleased that this actually works.
Yes.
So we can go play some games on it.
Play some really good games, yeah? Not just retro, really good.
Yeah.
But once you understand that about the expandability of the Super Famicom, you realise it seemed to be able to do so much, and yet sometimes seems so basic, and that's why it's the expandability. Well, and you think about the NES, everything on the NES looks like the NES, and I think Rare managed to push it a bit, and but you look at particularly like the Konami games and the Capcom games and the Nintendo games, Mega Man and all that kind of stuff. They're all the same. You can tell that's the NES sprites and the NES scrolling and the NES music, and it's very NES. The SNES seems to be able to break that, and the games are very varied, and that's why, isn't it? Actual different hardware. And of course, the big problem was, if you've got a CD-based console with no cartridges, you can't do it. You can't even save your games. You've got to have bloody memory packs. So the whole ideology of you make the hardware as cheap as possible, but you're still going to make a loss on it. Sell it really cheap. It was £130 when it came out, which is at the time it's very cheap really for the wonderful box of tricks you were getting. And then they made the money back on the cartridge because games were so expensive.
Yeah,
you adjust for inflation. It's awful. They went up. If you adjust for inflation, the most expensive games were £100. Now, which is like $120 or something. You can't justify that now. Back then they might as well put hardware in the cartridge because they're selling them for so much. But it was just a disc. It's just a lump of plastic. It costs a penny to make or whatever.
So how do you, if the cartridge came with custom hardware? Oh, where'd that screw go?
How do you get it not to have to?
How do you emulate it?
Exactly.
Or load it off an SD card or something.
Exactly. And that's why, Genesis emulation, PC Engine emulation was done. First time I downloaded a Genesis emulator, it just worked. And the SNES emulator took a long time. It was slow because they had to emulate all these cartridges. And of course, we've being cheapskates, we've got the cheap China version of the Super EverDrive. The Super EverDrive does the DSP 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't think it does the SA1. It definitely doesn't do the Super FX chip or anything like that. The new one, the SNES 2 SD, or I can't remember the name, SD2 SNES, seems really expensive. This was $39.99. I feel a bit bad actually because the SD2 SNES is like $139.99. But you have to appreciate the magic the guy that is programming it, being able to get it run all those chips is a small miracle. Is a bit of genius, And apparently the Super FX chip is particularly. I think the beta has just come out of it. Will support just about Super FX, so you can play Star Fox and whatever. Yeah. So yeah, that's the SNES Super Famicom. I think we'll probably cut to us having a go at some games on the Super Famicom, and we'll compare.
Yeah.